History of Castle Hill Light Station, Rhode Island. By F.R. Elrige. Congress first appropriated $10,000, under an Act of March 3, 1875, making appropriations for sundry civil expenses, for a fog signal at Castle Hill, entrance to Newport, Rhode Island. This was followed on August 4, 1886 by an appropriation of $10,000 for a lighthouse and fog signal at Castle Hill, Rhode Island, and this was augmented by an appropriation of $5,000 in addition to above amount for lighthouse etc., at Castle Hill on March 30, 1888, and another $5,000 in addition to some already appropriated for lighthouse at Castle Hill, Rhode Island on March 2, 1889. The lighthouse was established in 1890. As early as 1869, the annual report of the Lighthouse Board had indicated that applications had been made at various times in the past, and renewed that year, for a lighthouse and fog signal on Castle Hill to guide vessels, especially in thick and foggy weather, into Newport Harbor and Narragansett Bay. After a careful examination, the board had recommended in the year that an efficient fog signal be authorized for this point. An estimate for such a fog signal, including the cost of land, was submitted. In the following year, no action having been taken in the meanwhile by Congress, the request was repeated and a sum of $18,000, the amount previously estimated and submitted, was again requested. In 1871 the report stated that the application for a fog signal on Castle Hill was not being renewed, in view of the proposed erection of a steam siren signal at Beaver Tail Light Station distant only about 2 miles. In 1875 it was reported that an appropriation of $10,000 had been included in the Sundry Civil Expenses Act of March 3, 1875, but that the purchase has not been consummated, as the owners of the property where it is proposed to erect the signal have, within the past year, erected spacious mansions for summer residences, and are opposed to the erection of a signal on their land, which must of necessity, be at their very door, and in their opinion would depreciate the value of their property. No proper site, it seemed, could be procured in the locality except by condemnation, and even in this case the valuation of the land would undoubtedly be far beyond the sum appropriated for the fog signal. No other site could be occupied to the same advantage. There are no positions on either side of Castle Hill, seaward or landward, suitable for such a fog signal, and a selection could only be made of positions on the opposite shore, which would not answer the purpose. The board still felt that a fog signal was very much needed at this point, however. In 1877 a proposed automatic buoy, giving frequent blasts of a whistle in the channel off this point, was considered of doubtful value because of the sheltered character of the position. As no proper site could be obtained, the $10,000 appropriated in 1875 was accordingly allowed to lapse back to the Treasury. On August 4, 1886, the same amount, $10,000, was appropriated to establish both a lighthouse and a fog signal, provided that a site be obtained without expense to the government. Such an agreement was found to be impracticable with the amount of funds, $10,000, in hand, and on March 30, 1888 an additional appropriation of $5,000 was made. It was, however, still found impossible to build a lighthouse and fog signal for the amounts appropriated. Therefore, in its 1888 annual report, the Lighthouse Board recommended that the condition that the site be obtained without expense to the government be eliminated from the Appropriation Act. It is believed that such, a suitable site, can be obtained, the report continues, and that proper structures can be erected for the amount already appropriated, if it can be made available within the condition which now prevents action in the matter. A new, $15,000 appropriation omitting the undesirable condition was accordingly passed October 19, 1888. In 1889 the board reported separate sites for the lighthouse and dwelling were obtained without condition and without expense to the government. These structures will be built this season. The board reported the completion of the station in 1890. The site for the lighthouse and fog signal had been deeded for $1 to the government on June 10, 1887 by Alexander Agassiz, the famous professor of zoology at Harvard University. To have and to hold the same to the said United States of America for the uses and purposes aforesaid only, i.e. for the purpose of having a lighthouse and fog signal station erected thereon according to plans made and agreed upon by the parties hereto, but without any right-of-way thereto except when the ease is not accessible by water, and this grant is upon the further condition that the said lighthouse and fog signal station shall be constructed upon the plans and specifications agreed upon by and between the Lighthouse Board of the United States, and this granted and annexed hereto, which lighthouse and fog signal station shall not be hereafter changed but with the consent of the said grantor or those who may have his estate to at Castle Hill. When proposals were opened on October 20, 1887, it had been found that Mr. William T. Wilbur of Newport, Rhode Island, was the lowest bidder, $8,600, but this bid was coupled with the condition that he should be allowed right-of-way for men and materials over the most accessible route in the vicinity of the proposed site. This condition was refused by Professor Elrige, who wrote on May 22, 1888 to the engineer of the 3rd Lighthouse District. It is impossible for me to make any further concessions in the matter of the lighthouse. What with one thing and another, I stand an excellent show of having my place ruined and nobody to foot the bill. I must now protest myself at all hazards. I have signed a deed to the United States on the only terms which I will agree to, and if the government cannot carry out its part of the programs, I shall take the necessary steps to re-enter the land. I don't feel called open in any way either to be guided by the interest of navigation or of the public to ruin a place upon which I have spent a great deal of money, the more so as I feel and have always felt that had the Lighthouse Board met my objections there would have been no need of a light on Castle Hill, and the transfer of the Brenton's Reef Lightship to a straight range with Rose Island would have given all the possible safety needed for so short a run. Meanwhile, an offer made on July 27, 1888 by the Old Colony Steamboat Company, to contract for the building of the proposed lighthouse and fog signal for the sum of $13,600, was duly considered by the board. This was to be an entirely different site. The proposal, however, was turned down as being contrary to government policy to have public works erected by private parties at their cost in whole or in part. By November 23, 1888 the engineer of the 3rd Lighthouse District had, therefore, been directed to confer with the owner, and ascertain from him the term on which he would sell to the United States the land necessary for a site for this station, and in case he refuses to sell, or asks an excessive price for the land, or insists upon conditions which are inadmissible, then to recommend that the necessary steps be taken to obtain title by proceedings in condemnation. On May 20, 1889 the land for the lighthouse was deeded to the United States by Professor Elrige without condition and without expense to the government. It consisted of .198 acres. The station, when erected in 1889-90, consisted of a small granite tower, about 25 feet above land, located close to the shore and containing the light and fog bell. The keeper's dwelling was on a separate site nearby and was a commodious structure of 6 rooms with summer kitchen attached. A small pile wharf with boathouse attached was built for the use of the keeper. The light was first shown on May 1, 1890. The fog bell was discontinued November 30, 1891, and the bell end apparatus removed. Apparently the fog bell was discontinued in accordance with an understanding with Professor Elrige. The fog bell was reinstalled February 27, 1896, the new bell weighing 2,400 pounds. A more efficient fog signal was found to be necessary, the board reported. On December 7, 1896 Professor Elrige wrote the chairman of the Lighthouse Board. Referring to the statements I made to Mr. Lamy, and expressed by him in his letter to Colonel Ludlow, that the Lighthouse Board had not treated me fairly in the matter of the bell at the Castle Hill Lighthouse and had not kept their agreement with me, I beg to refer the Board to the correspondence which passed between Major Heap and myself at the time the question of a lighthouse on Castle Hill first came up. This correspondence plainly shows the conditions under which I was induced to deed land to the United States for a lighthouse on Castle Hill. For making my agreement with the official representatives of the Lighthouse Board, I had nothing to guide me or to hint to me that say agreements I should make would not be respected hereafter, nor that it would be necessary for me to protect myself in a manner differing from that which I should pursue in making similar agreements elsewhere. Nor was I informed that there were statutes emanating from Congress in existence then which would make any agreement made void on the part of the Lighthouse Board. In another letter to the Board of the same date, Professor Elrige stated this occurrence need not have happened, had I been notified by the proper authorities that it would be necessary for the officers of the board to erect guys on my property, to replace the light on the Castle Hill Lighthouse. Mr. Lamy's report is not correct in stating that he put up a guy. He put up 4 the measurements of which I have, some of which were fully 50 feet away from the right-of-way or from the boundary of the United States lot and on 2 sides of it. Nor did he use the words he quotes when he threatened me with military interference. Nor did I have a pleasant talk with him for about 20 minutes after cooling off. This is of no importance except to show that Mr. Lamy's encroachment was deliberate, and that he took no pains whatever to communicate with his superior officers after my complaint of his trespassing. He is merely trying to wriggle out of an unpleasant and serious position, by trying to make a joke of an unwarrantable intrusion. In 1898 a fog bell screen was set and fitted to deflect sound. In 1899 a new set of new model 5th-order lamps for lens was furnished the light station and the color of the upper half of the tower changed from gray to white. In the 1950 light list, Atlantic and Gulf coasts of the United States, Castle Hill Light Station is described as a conical granite tower, upper half white, 40 feet above water and visible for 10 miles. Located on the east 8 of the entrance to Narragansett Bay at 41 degrees 27.7 minutes north, 71 degrees 21.8 minutes west. The 250 candle power 5th order light flashes red every 30 seconds for 9 seconds. The fog bell sounds a group of 2 strokes every 20 seconds during fog.